Hey guys, welcome to my corner of the internet. Today we're going to be doing a journey through our heels. This is my best friend Casey. I've known her since, what?
14.
Yeah, so we've been friends for quite some time. This series is actually happening because this is kind of her idea, and I'm lucky to call her my friend, and she's here to do this.
Yay!
Okay.
So, I am from Miami, Florida. Grew up in an African-American family. My father was of Italian descent and met my mother in Miami and got married, and I was with both of them until I was about 2. We had some of the impact from Hurricane Andrew, and my parents ended up separating, and I went up into northern Florida with my grandmother just because of safety issues. There were actually some molestations happening in the child care facility that I was supposed to be watched at the Catholic Church locally in Miami in the late 80s. And so my grandmother decided to take us up north into Florida, where she had bought several acres with her and her 2 sisters. So it was just going to be a very low-key country-style living in a very safe environment with all of our family around. And so that was kind of the earliest start there. And then once I got into Live Oak, I had a really great experience with my grandmother, living with her and my grandfather and my half-sister Blair. And it was just pretty normal living. We lived in the countryside. My grandmother had several acres, so it was really peaceful. I kind of grew up a little hippie flower child where I spent all of my days amongst the flowers and just really enjoyed that alone time and that imagination, that creativity. And, you know, it could have been as simple as pulling little pink flowers off of a stem and putting them in a frisbee and then just creating this whole story around what these little particles were. So my imagination was really fostered from a young age just because I had that time and that space to really cultivate that side of myself. And I just had that really free-spirited, kind of wild child feel about it. I also did help out several times with my grandmother throughout the week, throughout the day even, just with her farm animals and her yard. We had, I think, 7 acres until I was 10. And so we would grow fresh vegetables. And so I got my green thumb in really early. I definitely don't mind getting my hands dirty. I really enjoy being out there and helping out. And I kind of have the mentality of being raised by a woman who was born in the 20s. And so I kind of got raised as my mother got raised by a woman who had a perception of living life as an African-American woman in the 20s. And so I do feel like over the years, my outlook and my perspective has been very old soul, but I do believe it's because of my upbringing and just having that influence of my grandmother around and her perspective about what a young African-American or mixed young African-American woman should have to do and be, how you have to carry yourself, how you have to present yourself in society, just down to basic of what you're wearing and how you speak and the type of mannerisms that you have. My grandmother was very, very particular about those things just because she wanted us to have the best shot at life that we could. And unfortunately in northern Florida at the time in the 90s, being mixed was not beautiful. I know everyone thinks being mixed and cute and thick is this great thing, but we were pretty much seen as an abomination in the 90s, and we dealt with racism daily, even getting on the bus in the morning all the way until we would get dropped off at the end of the day. It was just constant humiliation, name calling, and just constantly having to walk through and know that you're going to take that type of treatment just because of the color of your skin. And it was really heartbreaking as a 5-year-old. My grandmother is very dark-skinned, and when I'm normally in my natural habitat, I'm a lot darker in Miami because I'm out more year-round. But in Colorado, I'm definitely a lot lighter than I am normally in Florida. So growing up, I was a lot darker, and my was very, very dark. We've got quite a bit of Nigeria and Congo bloodlines that run through our family on her side, and so she really pulled some really heavy African-American genes. We have a little bit of mixture in there with some Native American, Cherokee, and Chickasaw, but my grandma was very dark-skinned, and so I remember being at a Winn-Dixie when I was 5, and I had this friend named Amanda. She was blonde hair, blue-eyed. We got along perfectly until her mom saw my grandmother in Winn-Dixie down in Florida, and I remember her looking at us and saying a slur and pulled the child right from in front of me and said she wasn't allowed to hang out with N-words, like, ever again. And I remember being devastated because she was one of my closest friends at school, and I think her mom may have thought I was some blend of, like, Italian or Spanish, and she was okay with that. But as soon as she saw this color of my grandmother's skin, I was no longer something that was appropriate for her daughter to involve herself with. And I remember being so scared one day on the bus with the racism that I actually wet my pants. And I remember we had to drive half an hour just to get out to the country where my grandmother lived, and the bullying was so bad that I sat there with people hunkering over my shoulders to the point where I literally wet my jeans that day. And my grandmother got me, and thankfully she was so sweet and kind, and she helped clean me up when I got home. But I just remember feeling really embarrassed and ashamed of who I was, and that's when I think a lot of the self-hatred started setting in, because when you're raised to believe that you're not good enough, you are an abomination, you are something that shouldn't be even in existence, and that I'm less than, or I'm a lemon because of my parents. And so it really did set in some ideals and some beliefs about what my value was on this earth as a mixed woman, as a petite woman, as a woman who was raised by only her African American family and didn't understand what it was like to have the mother and father in the home, was raised with my grandmother for many years. And also just having to cope with people judging me based on my looks, how I spoke, having to feel like I had this standard that I had to rise above and beyond just to even get the same treatment as someone else who was not my color or my ethnic background. Just really feeling like I was at a disadvantage from such a really young age was really difficult to navigate.
Yeah. I think that impacts you in such a way that you wouldn't really understand unless you go through it. And it's like, no matter how much you try to empathize or sympathize or, you know, all of that stuff, you just don't get it. Like, bullying is such a bitch. It's like, I want to know what's going on at the home for you to be evil to children, because children don't learn racism. They don't see color.
Absolutely.
And it's proven that kids don't see color.
Absolutely.
So it's sad because racism is taught. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Unless you have been through it and you see how kids are raised and you see what children's mindsets are, like, when they're pure and they don't have other outside opinions coming in, they don't see color.
Absolutely.
You know? And it's sad because it is learned, and they're probably learning these mean things from their parents. And I know where you're coming from, because as a kid, I was bullied, and I was told I wasn't good enough, and I was told I wasn't pretty, and all of these things. And I remember being at the store, the Asian market, with my parents, and the parents calling me these racial ass slurs. And then the kids would say it because the parents are saying it. So you can't tell me that racism isn't taught.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I fully agree. And
you know, but something
I don't know if you allow comments, but we definitely could take some questions and commentary and be able to try and give some feedback to that. Obviously, be kind, you know.
If you say anything mean about my friend, I will block you. Period. No mean comments. I don't want the comment section to be negative and nasty. Like, that's not the reason for my channel. Like, we're here to uplift each other and share our stories. So if you have a mean thing to say, keep it to yourself, or I will block you.
Absolutely.
Period.